Hey everyone, and welcome to open class number 10. Very excited that you are tuning in. We have 4 questions that have come in, 2 via email, and one is actually a text question that came in via the special number that is in Set It and Forget It. I'll share more about that in a second. And one that was a comment actually to a video. So firstly, I actually want to say that things are looking better here on the West Coast in terms of the wildfires. You know, last week I was kind of distracted and a little bit anxious about that, which was why there weren't as many videos that week as there typically is. But things are looking better, so I'm very, very confident that tomorrow I'll do more teaching and share some Naja concepts that I think are going to be really, really good. So with that said, let's jump in here and look at some questions. The first one is a question that came in from Matt. And Matt has read, I don't know if he's read the whole book, but he has purchased Set It and Forget It. And at in the book, I have like this text message that anybody can send a question. And as I say in the book, if it's a short question, I'll just send you a short reply right there and then. If it is if it requires some more complex or lengthier answer, then I'll reply on the channel. So you'll see how there's first a conversation between me and Matt, and then I decided let's reply here on the channel. So let's jump into it. And by the way, as always, nothing is a medical advice to you, Matt, or anybody else. Just general thoughts and comments that hope will help anyone that tunes in. All right, let's read this. Matt said, I think it was earlier today actually. Hi, Daniel. My name is Matt, and I've watched many of your YouTube videos. I have been trying a Set It and Forget It sleep window of 11 to 6 for a week and a half. I fall asleep quickly, but keep waking early, probably around 4:30. I've had insomnia for 9 months. I used to get 7 hours a night. I'm short an hour and a half every day. Should I try an 11 to 5 window since I keep waking up too early? I don't want to go to bed later since I sleep quickly. Please help. So I said, when I saw this on my phone, I said I can answer this pretty quickly. So I fired off an answer to Matt that read as follows. Hi, Matt. Thanks for the message. And I think the important thing in a spot like yours is to not look at the sleep window as trying, because Matt has said he was trying a sleep window. I think getting up at 5 seems very reasonable because you avoid the question of what should I do when I wake up early. But this said, anything that you do to try, meaning anything done to see if this or that will make you sleep more or better, that will make you have more trouble sleeping. So if you say that you will try an 11 to 5 sleep window to try to get better sleep, best not do it. If you will never have say if you will just say I'm gonna get up at 5 because I think it's convenient at that time and I like getting up early and I will get stuff done early, and you look at it as a way of making wakefulness your friend, that will work great. The key is always to not question it. It's kind of like when people diet. If they look at it as a diet, it never works. When they look at it as a lifestyle change, it totally works. So always pick a sleep window that you think could be a lifestyle change that you don't mind doing forever potentially. Like this is where 11 to 6 may actually work better for you. If you think you can do 11 to 6 for a month or even years, I think it's better because then there's actually no sleep window. You're just doing something that is practical and works for you indefinitely. If you go for the latter, I would just stop checking what time it is when you wake up and try to make wakefulness your friend by doing things you enjoy, and even if it's early in the morning. Does this make sense? Thanks again for the message. Noticing some typos. I have to be more careful about those. Okay, so Matt said, it does make sense, and thanks for getting back to me. I just worry that I need a tighter window to move forward since I'm probably averaging 5 to 5.5 hours of sleep and staying in bed for 7 hours. I've been at a plateau for 3 months now, and it's affecting my well-being. If I tighten the window, will that get me more sleep in a week or two? I'm having a real problem with the sleep effort aspect. I just don't know how to let go or not try when I wake up 2 hours before my alarm. The effort tends to be to try and calm myself with breathing and meditation, which of course doesn't work. I don't want to try traditional CBTI because I don't want anxiety of trying to stay up till 12:30 or clock watch or log everything to get out of bed every 20 minutes. I'd rather do 11 to 6, but I wonder if insomnia has shifted my body clock to a permanent earlier wake up time. And now I need to build backwards and start waking up at 5 and eventually get my bedtime earlier through sleep restriction, like 10 p.m. to 11. I'm reading your response again, and I feel like my answer is to do 11 to 6, LOL. I guess the real question is, should I have a 7-hour window if I'm only getting 5 to 5.5 hours? And as insomnia resets my internal clocks, so my body will keep waking me an hour and a half earlier than normal. Also, I'm physically active, but I stopped working. Desk job. Would getting back to work be the missing link to getting past this? I'm probably not using enough mental energy during the day. Oh, and something to add. My initial insomnia started as onset. Before all this, I would go to sleep like clockwork, 10:30 to 6, slept like a champ. I had some family stressors that led to acute insomnia. I'd lay in bed all night, sleeping maybe 2 hours. I'd stay in bed for 15 hours, quit my job. This went on for 4 months. Finally, I tried to get up every day at a fixed time and exercise and establish some progress, 45 hours. So the onset is no longer an issue. I fall asleep quickly, less than 10 minutes, but this is why I wonder if my clock is permanently shifted early, because I keep waking up at 4:30, going to bed about 11 each night. Wanted to get the full picture. Perfect. And, so I have there's 3 things in my mind, Matt, that I immediately thought of as I was reading this. And, as always, so when there's follow-up questions, please let me know. But firstly, just general commentary, the story is the typical one of somebody who slept great. There was a stressor and when there's a stressor, we don't sleep that well, completely normal and expected. But, when the stressor goes away, it's no longer there, we are quote unquote supposed to sleep well again. And when that doesn't happen, it is because during that time of stress and little sleep, some part of your brain identified, sleeplessness as a threat, as a problem, as unwanted, and it started like fight or flight. It started trying to escape that perceived threat, but you can't escape it. So the more you try to escape it, the more trouble you have. So it's a classical story. Now, you started at some point being like, okay, I'm going to get up early and I'm going to do exercise. And, if you do that, if somebody does, I'm going to get up early, I'm exercise, so I get that sleep, then you are actually doing more fight and flight. You're trying to escape wakefulness. You're trying to get more sleep. Then it doesn't work. It doesn't help you. You get caught in more trouble sleeping. So my point here is that, Matt, at some point, you actually went the other way. You got up early and you exercised, as a means of, at least the getting up part, that was a means of being okay with getting less sleep. It may sound kind of like, did I really do it for that reason? But that's ultimately what happened. You stopped trying to sleep in, trying to get as much sleep as possible. You got up early. You were willing to sacrifice sleep. You were willing to have insomnia. You were trying less. And that is what led you to sleep better. Sometimes it can be confusing because, no, I kind of built a strong sleep drive, but it isn't really that. Sleep drive helps, but ultimately it's always like trying less that gets you the result of sleeping better. So my point here is that you've already done really good work in terms of like less pressure, trying less, being more okay with being awake at night. And that is what has led you to a position where you are doing better. And the key to doing even better is to try even less. That is always, always, always the answer. So I want to say this, when you in the past slept, from like 10:30 to 6, like every night, I don't think there's any reason to do more tighter window than 7 hours, 11 to 6. I think that will work great. I think the key is when you have this early morning awakening, when you wake up like an hour and a half or so before your alarm, then the waking up part there is completely normal. We all wake up many, many times during the night. That wakefulness is sprinkled in sleep for every human being. But between 11 and 4:30, you are not reacting to it. You wake up, you roll over, you fall back asleep again. You are okay with being awake. You are willing to have insomnia. But when it's close to your wake up time, you have spent some of your sleep drive. It is easier for you to become more alert and you react more strongly to it. Now you become like at like 4:30, now you become fully awake. You realize you're awake, you react to it, you start thinking about how you can get back to sleep, and that propagates those awakenings happening. Because the more you try to escape wakefulness, the more wakefulness you have, right? So I think I would say the key, 2 things. Number 1, try not to check the time. Maybe it's getting light outside and you kind of know it's close to your morning time and you're kind of tempted to check the time. But I think still, like when you're awake in the morning and you kind of feel fully awake, you're not going to go back to sleep. accept that you're awake. Don't try to fight it. Don't try to find a way to like make yourself sleep more. Just instead find a way to make that early morning somehow a friend of yours. You know, you haven't slept enough. True, you're probably going to feel tired because you didn't get the full amount of sleep your body needs. But when you still, despite that, say, okay, I'm awake now and I didn't get as much sleep as I would like to do, but wakefulness is okay. I'm going to find a way to accept that I'm awake and actually do something positive with it. That is the magic is always there, because when you no longer see it as a problem that you wake up early, you see it as it's okay. Then your body no longer tries, your brain no longer tries to like fight wakefulness, and then you start sleeping really, really well. Even if you wake up like 4:30 or 5 or 5:30, even you eventually go like, I'm awake, but it's okay. I'm okay to be awake, and then you fall back asleep. So that is always the key. So that said, that was kind of the big picture thing, but let us go over, I think there was some more details I would like to go over. Firstly, I think we kind of covered this one again, you know, set it and forget it. It's like when it comes to sleep window, set it and forget it. So I think if you pick 11 to 6, just keep that, you know, just think of it as, I'll do this indefinitely. It's just the way, it's just what I'm doing right now. And by the way, I think the 6 a.m. is good to keep consistent, but the 11 p.m., if you feel sleepy earlier, like 10:30, 10:45, or whatever, you know, you can go to bed earlier. But the 6 o'clock, try to be pretty consistent with that. I think that's good. And you already pointed out that the problems with traditional CBTI, too much attention to sleep. I totally agree with it. I've been on a plateau for 3 months. You know, I think that plateau just happens because you, in a way, it's kind of like you get the plateau because you think you have a plateau, meaning like you're like, I've gotten this far, but how can I get the final stretch? It is the desire to get to the next level that keeps you in a plateau, if you will. So when you go like, maybe I've hit a plateau, but it's okay to be on a plateau. There's no rush. I'm just going to be friend wakefulness. That's when you start really making that final progress that you're looking for. And is it okay to have a 7-hour window when you only sleep 5 to 5.5 hours? Absolutely, it's totally fine. As long as you again become okay with the wakefulness that you have. You don't need to, you know, I really don't think you need to change how you think about the sleep window, but you can just change how you perceive wakefulness, approach wakefulness. Again, you could, when you wake up in the morning, you can stay in bed, you know, and think of something nice, read a book or do something like that, or you can leave the bed if that feels better. So in a way, if you leave the bed, you kind of have a smaller sleep window, but you don't think of it that way. So you're not tweaking and changing things all the time. You have that sleep window, you just change how you approach wakefulness. I think that is the best. Perfect. And I think, next, I think was the question of work, you know, would getting back to work be the missing link? I think it very well could be 100%, because you have that like daytime obligation, you have that routine, you have your thoughts going a different direction, you're preoccupied. I think it totally could be. Absolutely. You know, that said, if you're not finding a job immediately, like that doesn't need to be a problem. You just have to find something else that kind of grabs your attention and your focus. But work, I think, often can really, really help. And we kind of talked about this already, about how it all started. So Matt, I hope this answered all the questions. Thanks for getting the book. Thanks for the question. And any follow-up questions, please let me know. Cool. So that said, we will move on to another question, which is from DI. Let's read this. Hi, Diane. First, I wanted to say that my sleep hasn't been bad most days since we last spoke, and I had a good period. That is amazing. And thanks to your work. However, I had been getting bad nights of no sleep from time to time due to suddenly thinking about it. I had been going through an exam period recently, and as a result, as you can imagine, had a rough time. My issue seems to be on days I have something coming up where I need to get up early via alarm around 6 or 7. I just can't get any rest on those nights, and I'm very stressed. Usually I get up late morning, like at 10 a.m. because I could do it until now, and that's when I was always feeling the best after waking long before my sleep issues. I received a short-term job opportunity where I could get some experience in my field recently, which I would like to take, but I'm worried about not being able to sleep due to the early rising schedule. Having to get up early creates pressure for some reason. Normally, even if I was very stressed and nervous, I could still fall asleep at 6 a.m. even if I didn't sleep until then, because that's when I could finally give up and relax as a sleep window had passed. Do you know how I could find a way to view the nightly period with the same lack of pressure I look at the early morning, for example? And also, any ideas about how I can actually get a little rest, at least on nights prior to a test or an interview, because I'm bound to have those coming up in the future, and it would be nice if I got some sleep before any of them. I just can't bring myself to accept no sleep before an important event, for example, as a result, and as a result, I don't sleep before. Thanks a lot. Anytime. And you know, you kind of, in the last part here, you kind of said it all. I just can't bring myself to accept no sleep before an important event, for example, and as a result, I don't sleep before it. That sums it up. It is like, if you imagine somebody that cannot accept losing 1 minute of sleep, that is completely unacceptable for them. They need to get 8 hours, which is 480 minutes of sleep, not a minute less. Anything less than that is unacceptable, totally disastrous. It cannot happen. It just cannot happen. That person will have a lot of insomnia, because they're not even willing to lose a minute, you know. But what I'm trying to convey here is that the more protective you are of your sleep, the more you're like, I just can't lose any sleep, the more trouble sleeping you have. You know, for DI here, we can hear that there's a lot of acceptance. You know, sometimes I don't sleep all night, but I sleep in the morning. That is okay. But when it comes to that night before an important event, then there's less acceptance. Then it's like, that is a very important night, and that night it's unacceptable for me to have a sleepless night. And that is, of course, why that happens. You have the answer here. So the question becomes, so this is a really question mostly of what I call anticipatory insomnia, where you may sleep pretty good night to night, but when you're traveling, when you have a big thing at work, when there's some kind of event, a doctor's appointment, something that like tomorrow I know I have to be up at a certain time, or there's some big event, that's now when I have a lot of trouble sleeping. And so with anticipatory insomnia, I think there are a couple of things. I think there's generally like 3 things I think that are really important. Number 1, it often seems like, okay, I know that next Friday I have an important thing. I have to get up early. So that Thursday before, I'm probably going to have trouble sleeping. So therefore, I now have a whole week to prepare for that. So I'm going to make sure, I do the best I can to make sure I sleep well on Thursday. That is not good at all. It seems intuitively so good to know. I know to predict when you're going to have trouble sleeping, so you can do something about it, which is, what helps in 99% of the things we humans are involved with. You see when a problem's going to happen, and then therefore you can kind of predict and prevent something. But when it comes to sleep, it's the complete opposite. The more you think of like, okay, I'm going to prepare, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, so I don't sleep that night, the more pressure and anticipation and preoccupation on that particular night, and the less you're going to sleep. So counterintuitively, number one rule for anticipatory insomnia is that there's nothing you can do to prepare yourself for that, except of course the thought work we're going to talk about, but it's not like you can do anything in particular to make sure you sleep a lot that night. In fact, not preparing for it is key. Very counterintuitive as everything else in sleep, but that is very important. Number 2, I think this is maybe the most important one, is detective work. And detective work, I call detective work when you are looking for clues, evidence that supports an idea that maybe like the opposite of what you are thinking. For example, you are thinking, it is very important that I get sleep the night before this job interview I have, or this presentation I have, right? But you also know that the more pressured you are to sleep, because the more you think it is important, then the less sleep you're going to get the night before. So that's when you deploy detective work. And detective work, you can use it kind of like looking backwards or forward. And by the way, Navinder, hi. I'm gonna comment on this. If you're there, like, please stick around, because I'm super excited. I definitely want to comment on that one. But yeah, going back to detective work. So DI, you can either go back in time and look at other times you've had a job interview or something important happened, and you didn't sleep at all the night before, and try to think of one time that happened and you actually did fine. You actually did fine the day after. Maybe it just happened one time in your entire life, but that is all detective work you need to do. You have the clue, you have the insight, you have the evidence that not everything hinges upon sleep. You can still do fine even if you have sleepless nights. Super, super important, because when you know that, you can go, actually, you know what? It is okay if I don't sleep tonight. It is okay. Even if I have something super important tomorrow, it is okay, because I have seen that I can do well. And I can't remember which episode this was, 200 something, Brittany. She was going to run a marathon, an Ironman triathlon. And she had so much anticipatory insomnia. She literally didn't sleep at all the night before. And she completed that Ironman triathlon on literally no sleep. And I was so excited for her, because I knew that when she'd done that, she could go through anything knowing that it'll be okay, and it'll prevent so much anticipatory insomnia. So number one, we see don't prep. Number two, we've seen use detective work, and you can do it. Detective work you can do in a forward fashion too. You kind of like, you have a sleepless night, and then you go through the following day and you find that, oh, I did okay. You can just kind of observe things as they go along, if you can't look backwards and find those clues that you really need. Number three, also important one, is try not to cancel things, because when you cancel an event, it seems like evidence that you really couldn't have done it. If, let's say, you have a job interview, you don't sleep at all, and you call it, sorry, I have to do it some other day, then you don't know what was going to happen. You might have done just fine, but the act of canceling it seems like evidence that you really you couldn't do that interview because you can't sleep. And insomnia gets so much power from that that it's really good not to cancel events. So I think those are the big ones. Let's just check this one more time from DI. Before we talk about Navinder, I'm really excited about talking about your live comment here. Just want to check it and miss something. Oh yeah, this job opportunity. My thinking is like, do not take a job because you're afraid of having to have a schedule and get out and up on at a certain time. I think it will really help having a schedule. I think it might be really tough in the beginning, but if you just kind of like commit to it, you do your best, you use all the insights you know from here, etc., it will be super good. You will prove to yourself that you can do it. I think so. Super, super helpful if you do that. And oh yeah, this one, surrender sleep. You can fall asleep at 6 a.m. because you're not pressured. I mean, that's another one. Like when people are like, I was up all night, finally I fell asleep as the sun was rising. Classic, because you're no longer feeling pressured to sleep. And if you go to bed and you are okay with being up all night, hard as it is, you can have the same thing happen in the evening. It's always like when you don't feel like you have to sleep, you sleep. And if you go to bed saying, really fully feeling like it's okay if I don't sleep at all that night, it's hard to get there, but you can get there. And when you get there, you can sleep just as well when it's not 6 a.m. So I think, I think this was it, DI. Let me know how all this sounded. And now Navinder, I was super excited seeing this. This is from Navinder. Hey, Daniel, I seem to have nearly cured my insomnia. I genuinely don't care anymore. Only it's just that my hyperarousal comes and goes. Generally don't care, meaning I don't worry at all anymore, but the hyperarousal comes and goes, which has made me feel confused. I don't think there is anything really confusing, or to me, nothing that is strange or unusual, I should say, about this. Firstly, I want to say exactly. I generally don't care, meaning I don't worry at all. Like just for anyone out there that's hearing this, it is one of I think it's the most common thing I hear people say that have gotten to a point where they sleep well or much better is, I just don't care that much anymore. And for someone that has trouble sleeping, that doesn't ring true. It's like, how can you not care? And that's where this explanation from Rebound is so helpful. Don't care, meaning I don't worry at all anymore. And that is always, that's the foundation. That's the key. When you're no longer attached to the outcome, as I like to say, when you're natto, when you're not attached to the outcome, when you're like, I want to sleep really good, but if I don't, that is also okay. That is the key. Then you start sleeping really well. And now hyperarousal, it can linger. It can linger for a while. Imagine like this, your brain has this radar, this classical, like you've seen the movies, like ding, 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 ding. And sleep was kind of at some point like not even on the radar, but when you had trouble sleeping, it became big on the radar. It was like in the big blob there, like ding, 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 like going off, going, sleep is a problem. And now, when you've like educated yourself, you're not worried anymore. Sleep has become more and more peripheral on the radar, but it's still probably out there a little bit. Like your brain is still like, you're doing much better, but maybe sleep is still a problem. Like you still have this lingering hyperarousal, it's not surprising at all. And I think if you just keep doing exactly what you're doing, eventually sleep will come off the radar completely. Navinda says, for example, I could be fine for 1 week, but then I could have some hyperarousal for a few days, and then the hyperarousal goes away again, so on. Yeah, no surprise there. Again, sleep is still like in the periphery of your radar. Sometimes it gets a little bit bigger, but then it goes out and like it is on its way out from the radar. So Navinda, like nothing surprising here. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing fantastic. And there's going to be a time in the near future where sleep is off the radar completely. Strong work, very, very strong work. I'm super excited to read this. Well done, Navinda. Cool. Well, let's go on here. 2 more questions. This is from Naja. I'm going to say Naja because I don't know exactly how to pronounce your name. Sorry if I get it wrong. And I think it sounds like she, but I don't know. I'm just going to say she. And by the way, anyone out there who writes an email, if you prefer she, he, they, let me know. Otherwise, I guess I often get it wrong. But let's read this. Hi, Daniel. I want to start off with thanking you for the great and informative content on your channel anytime, since it's been a huge help in understanding what's been going on. Unfortunately, like so many that reach out, I've been trapped in the SFI, FFI rabbit hole for about 3 weeks now. My problem is that it seems like I'm actually having other symptoms that aren't insomnia. I've been having occasional involuntary movements in my legs, especially when trying to sleep, as well as difficulty with thinking clearly, forgetting names and words, and reading. I misread words as others, which also worsens when trying to sleep, which seems my thoughts are just word salad. I'm also having hot flashes. My heart seems to be racing in periods. I'll admit that I can't tell how much of this is caused by anxiety, which is of course a factor, and it isn't necessarily affecting my actual capability to live my life, but it's lawful, especially because I can't stop hyper fixating on symptoms and convincing myself I'm going to be dead within the year. I've been on Zopiclone on and off for the last 3 weeks, and it seems to be working well, but without it, I can't seem to catch more than an hour of unbroken sleep, and I can barely tell if I'm sleeping or not at this point. My question to you is, how do I stop worrying, even when symptoms are matching up? I'm worried about bringing this up to my GP, as she knows I have some hypochondria and understandably might not take it seriously. Can anxiety and normal insomnia, even if relieved by occasionally, truly wreak this much havoc on the brain and body? Best wishes, Naja. All right, very, very good questions here. And I think I'm going to focus on just saying that I think, Naja, what I'm reading here is that you have been trapped in the SFI rabbit hole, and you have some symptoms that are not insomnia, but you also know yourself, you have kind of hypochondria tendencies, etc. So, okay, let's start here. It's as always, when anybody is concerned about their health, go to your doctor. I'm just sharing general thoughts and comments here. But that said, when it comes to like familial insomnia, if you don't have a family history of it, then my understanding of FFI is if you don't have family history, you don't have that. SFI, we know that it is really truly not an insomnia, and I would say the same thing for FFI. Neither of them are insomnias. When I say insomnia here, I mean somebody is worried about their sleep, trying to figure out, can't understand why they're not sleeping, anxious, things like that, which are not part of those neurodegenerative conditions. So weirdly, I think the more anxious you are, the more or less, the less likely you are to have one of those conditions. And when it comes to FFI and SFI, my understanding is that it is very, very obvious to somebody like your doctor or your friend or your family member, that something is wrong. Not so much to the person that has it necessarily, but to other people it's very obvious. So if it is the opposite, if other people say you're just anxious and you yourself are the one who's like, no, maybe there's something going on, that's the complete opposite of what we have in those conditions, like, for example, Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. It is very obvious that somebody has something going on with those conditions. So now we talked about that. Now, I think, to me, like, one of the most important things in this message is this last question. Let's go to that one now, which is basically the question of, could this all be anxiety? Could this all be anxiety? Like, can normal insomnia wreak this much havoc in the brain and body? And, the short answer to that one is 100% absolutely. We have had so many examples on this channel of somebody who's like, start reading about like SFI, for example, and they go like, oh, balance problems. Gosh, I have a balance problem. And like tinnitus. Oh my gosh, I have tinnitus. Oh, and and why? And now the question is, why does that happen? Why is it that when you read about symptoms, you start having them? Well, it is because your brain is this safety machine, the survival machine. It's always there to keep you safe. So when it has identified like, okay, maybe you have this, maybe this is a problem, then finding symptoms of that is a way for your brain to make sure you take this seriously. It could be this, it could be this. Look, you have this, you have that, you have that. It could be this, right? So the reason you start having symptoms of the thing you're reading about is because the brain is trying to keep you safe. So I think it is always good to understand those things, because it kind of demystifies it. And when something is demystified, you feel like, oh, I know what you're doing, brain. You're trying to make me think I have this because you're trying to keep me safe. I appreciate it. But when you know it, it's easier to say, okay, I see what you're doing. And you worry less about it, right? That is super important. Now, the other, it's very similar, is the answer to this question that often comes up, like, could this really all be anxiety? Like, is that it? Like, could this really be all anxiety? And briefly here, I'm going to make a separate episode about this, but briefly here, let's talk about type 1 and type 2 errors, which comes from like the academia world. So a type 1 error is like, imagine the boy who cried wolf, right? He cries, wolf, there's a wolf coming. And the villagers hear that and they run to him and they see there was no wolf. Those villagers committed a type 1 error. They thought there was a problem, a threat, but there wasn't any. Insomnia is a type 1 error. Your brain thinks being awake at night is a threat to my health, to my well-being, but it isn't. That insomnia is a false alarm. It is a type 1 error. Now, there are also type 2 errors. Type 2 errors. So when the boy cries wolf that third time, and the villagers go, nah, there's no wolf, and the boy gets eaten up by the wolf, the villagers committed a type 2 error. There was actually a threat and a problem, but they didn't take it seriously. When you go, I'm not talking about you here, Naja, but when somebody goes, could this all be anxiety? That is the brain being concerned about committing a type 2 error. The brain is like, could all this really be anxiety? I'm not so sure. What if I miss something? What if I commit a type 2 error? What if I miss out on that thing that this could really be? So the question, could this all be anxiety? Again, is the brain trying to keep you safe. It wants to make sure it's not committing a type 2 error. And again, when you understand why your brain is doing all these things, I think it becomes so much easier to understand. And a quick comment here from Riley. It's so true. Anxiety can lead to so many physiological problems. It absolutely did for me. And what I learned here about insomnia, I applied 100% to anxiety too. One of the biggest reliefs I found is spending time talking to, being around, when safe, people who aren't thinking about it as much as I am. It's so easy to get stuck. I think this is a really, really important one. Sometimes when you have like insomnia, you feel isolated, you kind of stick to yourself, you don't want to talk to people. But if you're around people who don't even know that you have trouble sleeping and they're just talking about, people are one of the most engaging things there are. So when you're sticking around people that are just like, talking about other things, it can really help you if you have gotten to a point where you're not worried as much. Like if you're in that phase where you're like completely obsessed with it, then you still have to do some education, some learning. But when you find that, oh, I kind of understand it now, I'm kind of ready to let go, other people can be super, super helpful. So now we talked about type 1 error, type 2 error. So I think those the real important points here. Oh yeah, and the Zopi clone, there you have it again. Some, when you read about the SFI and FFI, you give somebody sleep medications, it doesn't work. So when somebody takes sleep medications and they then sleep more, another evidence that it's not a neurodegenerative condition. And then, when something stops working, it is really because, in my opinion, always when you become, you become skeptical, that's when it stops working. But this really question here was like, when I stop taking it, I don't sleep at all. I think that's real. That rebound insomnia comes, in my opinion, predominantly from knowing that you're not taking anything. You have, your confidence has been externalized, and you believe that I need this to sleep. And when you don't have that, you don't believe that you will sleep at all. And that's really what produces sleeplessness. So one thing that's always good is like when you're taking medication and you're sleeping, internalize the confidence. Know that nothing can make you sleep. It's always your body that does it. So even if you're taking medication, it was always your body that produced the sleep. Knowing that, you can internalize sleep confidence. So, and how can you stop hyperfixating and things like that? I think it's, again, education. When you understand why your brain is trying to have you hyperfixate, then it's much easier not to do it. And again, final thing here for Naja is the more you try to be like, I don't want to think about this, then you think more about it. So when your brain is trying to tell you like, look at this, look at this, look at this, then it's often better to be like, yeah, you're right. I've had that jerk there, but it's I understand what's happening, etc. Instead of being like, I don't want to think about this, I don't want to think about, then go there, write things down, maybe take a few minutes every day, write down the things that are on your mind, show the brain that, yeah, you're listening to the brain, you're not ignoring it. Then it kind of stops nagging you about things that it thinks is important. Naja, let me know how all this sounded, if it made sense. And we'll hear this one from Riley. Just dropping in to say, hey, things are going great. Now off to watch some TV and not be attached to the outcome. Love it. Thanks so much, Riley. It really, really helps. And Navinder had some more comments as well. Let's read it. Also, guys, one thing that held me back was that I always felt doubtful of curing insomnia. But in all honesty, everything Daniel teaches works. I even managed to come off a bunch of medications. Amazing, amazing work, Navinder. Hopefully, when I fully cure it, I should come back and do success story. 100%, 100%. Also, thanks for the word lingering. Yeah, Navinder, amazing. Super happy. Thanks to you and Riley for these super helpful comments. And with that said, we will move to the last question here, which is a very important one, common one from Matthew. This is a comment to open class number 8, I think. Hi, Daniel. Excited for your video course and will enroll as soon as it is live. Can't wait to have you, Matthew. I'm just wondering if you have any tips on coping with a negative mentality which can be induced by lack of sleep. I've been having a rough time again lately with anxiety and hyperarousal at night, perhaps only getting 1 to 2 hours of very broken sleep per night. This leaves me feeling completely physically drained and in a poor frame of mind during the day, unable to get the motivation or physical strength to do what I'd like to such as workout. Would you have any advice on getting through the days whilst remaining calm and not letting into negative beliefs such as, will I ever be able to sleep again? And poor sleeping is ruining my health. Hope you're well. Yeah, there's a lot actually here, but let's focus on this one. Like when you've had a sleepless night or a couple of them, you do of course feel tired because you didn't sleep well. True. But if you listen to Jim's success story from in the success stories playlist that you'll find in the description to this video and any recent video, you will see that he really highlights how so much of his mental, emotional exhaustion came from all the thinking he did around sleep, like the hyper focusing and the obsessing about it. That drained him of so much mental energy that made him more tired than the actual lack of sleep did. And then the question from Matt then becomes, so how do I keep myself from thinking about sleep all the time? And two things immediately come to my mind. One is the thing that we kind of touched upon with Naja, but let me share this analogy that I've been starting to use lately that I think is really good. So imagine that you see this friend of yours walking over, like they're walking over on their way over train tracks, right? And you see that there's a train coming, and you go, "Hey, John, like there's a train coming." And John just keeps walking, and he's like, "Hey, John, look out for the train." And John kind of like goes like this, and you're like, "What's the matter with you, John? Look out!" You know, the more you really want to save your friend, but he kind of keeps ignoring you. He drives you nuts, right? That's your brain. Okay. When you've had a sleepless night, your brain is all in full safety mode. It's like, you didn't sleep. Why didn't you sleep? You got to do something about it. This is a problem. This is a problem. This is a problem. This is a problem. And the more you like, I don't want to have these thoughts. I don't want to have these thoughts. You're like John. You're like trying to cover your ears and not listen. And then the brain really was like, why aren't you listening? This is a real problem. Why aren't you listening? So inside here is, if John went, "Hey, there's no train actually. I know all about this." And you got, "Oh, he's right. There wasn't actually a train." Then you're like, "Oh, good. I don't have to nag John because there wasn't really a problem." You're kind of just like, "I wish John would have just told me that the first time I shouted," right? And so's the brain. Like, if you listen to it and you're like, "Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I got it. But I think I'll be fine." You're showing the brain that you're listening, and it doesn't feel the need to nag you and have you hyperfixate, right? And how do you show the brain that you're listening? Writing the thought download I talk about a lot every day. Just write down things that you worry about on a piece of paper, 5 minutes every day. Just get them down, do it as an exercise, show the brain that you're listening, give it an outlet, really good. Or just going where your thoughts are taking you, like it's saying, like, if you don't sleep, you're never going to sleep. You're going to have another sleepless night, something like that. And then you just go there. It's super hard, but you just go there. Just imagine yourself like, okay, I'm having like 5 sleepless nights in a row, and this is what's happening, and this is what's seeing happening. And it's like almost just thinking about it's kind of anxiety producing. But when you're willing to go there, when you're willing to experience it, even if just in your imagination, you're showing your brain that, oh, yeah, he's really listening. All right. And then it stops nagging you. So listening to your brain, really helpful for, stop hyperfixating, obsessing. Number 2, self-kindness, super important too. When you had a sleepless night, especially like Matt, you paid attention here, you're learning, you're doing things, and you're like, here I go again. It's so easy to get to that place where you're like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get this right? I've tried this, I've done this. And then the more you kind of are self-judging and blame yourself, and the more you can get stuck in this position where you're like, I'm the problem, nothing is going to help, I'm always going to be there, I'm stuck. You easily get stuck. Self-kindness, super important. Really the best thing I think is, think of a friend that told you that I had a sleepless night, I'm feeling like crap. Your friend wouldn't go, what's wrong with you? Like, why can't you get this right? Your friend would go, it's all right. Give you a hug, say, you'll be fine. Just, try to, they would say something warm and encouraging, right? Do like that to yourself. Be that person to yourself. Be kind to yourself, and then when you see that I'm not the problem, I just have a safety brain that kind of like is a little confused, but it's okay. It's trying to keep me safe. No blame, no judgment, self-kindness, self-love, self-compassion. You see that you are not the problem, then things get much easier. You get unstuck and you can easily move forward. So those are my big thoughts there, Matthew. And I know I already replied in a comment, and that seemed to make sense. So let me know how things go, and we look forward to having you in the video course when that comes up, of course. And let's see. I think we commented on everything. So yeah, I want to say thanks so much for everyone joining this open class. I will be back tomorrow, and maybe I'll teach that type 1 and type 2 error. And there was some other things I was really excited about, but we'll teach some real good NATO concept tomorrow. And until then, take it easy, and look forward to having you back here soon. And by the way, anybody has a question, here, questions@sleepcoachschool.com, and anyone who wants more like one-on-one a coaching, check out BedTyme on the App Store where I do coaching. You're very welcome there as well. All right, thanks so much, and see you tomorrow.